Boy, oh boy, the time has finally arrived. The leaks and rumors are all confirmed. Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together, is returning as Tactics Ogre Reborn on November 11th, 2022 for PS4, PS5, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and if you know anything about me, you know how much I love strategy RPGs. Chief among them is Final Fantasy Tactics, which is followed closely by Fire Emblem as a series and Tactics Ogre. So as I'm sure you can imagine, this announcement has absolutely launched me to new levels of hype. Let's discuss what's happening, shall we? At the time of this writing, the reveal trailer for the Reborn project has just been released a few hours ago on August 4th, 2022. The link to the full trailer is in the description, and I'll be showing sections of it throughout the video. Square Enix has also published a write-up going over the major changes happening as part of the project, which you can also find below if you'd like to peruse it for yourself. Tactics Ogre Reborn is a remaster or partial remake? It kind of falls in between, of Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together, the 2010 PSP remake of the original Tactics Ogre, which launched on the Super Nintendo in 1995. In Square Enix's own words, Tactics Ogre is the crown jewel of the tactical role-playing genre, quote unquote, and while I much prefer Final Fantasy Tactics, it's not hard to see why Square feels that way. Both games were helmed by Yasumi Matsuno, and it was the quality of Tactics Ogre that led to Square hiring Matsuno and his team to make Final Fantasy Tactics. Also, if you're familiar with Final Fantasy and the Nier series, you'll recognize the art of Akihiko Yoshida, who is the principal character designer on Tactics Ogre. The story of the game is inspired by real-life conflicts, and very serious ones, including, but not limited, to those in Syria, Armenia, and Rwanda, as well as the Bosnian War. While I don't want to spoil the story of the game here, if you know your history, you'll know that these conflicts introduced the idea of ethnic cleansing to our modern vernacular. War is not pretty, and Tactics Ogre does not shy away from the theme. Now, with that said, let's get into some of the changes that we know now are going to be happening. Square Enix has highlighted these major changes that are coming to this version of the game, and it's quite the impressive list, if I do say so myself. First off, the graphics. All of the character art, portraits, and game backgrounds have been overhauled in high def. This is a much needed change, as going from the PSP to modern consoles and PC is quite the leap, especially for the game's resolution. That said, ever since the leaks, I've been seeing discussion and some contention over the quality of this overhaul. Many people are displeased with the filter that's apparently been placed over the game, smoothing it out and removing some of that pixel style that's so beloved. Personally, it hasn't bothered me too much from what we've seen thus far, and I want to see the game in person before I draw any conclusions. I love the backgrounds and the character portraits from what we've seen, but I will admit the character sprites do seem slightly off to me. You can see some of those comparisons here. The UI for the game has also been completely overhauled. With higher resolution and larger screens comes a lot more room to work with, and Square Enix is making the most of it. All the information you could possibly need is on screen and easy to read, while also giving you a full view of the battlefield. Square Enix also states that the controls have been streamlined, though without having the game in our hands, it's hard to really quantify the quality of that change or really what that even means. We're not very specific. One of the biggest changes to the game, and one that I am very excited for, and you should be as well, is the sound design. Everything has been redone. Hitoshi Sakamoto, the original composer for Tactics Ogre, has re-recorded the entire soundtrack with a live orchestra, with new pieces that were composed for the Reborn project as well. This is incredible, and I'm so wildly excited to see what they've done, because the soundtrack on Let Us Cling Together was already incredible. Some of the best music I've ever heard in gaming. So to know that they've now re-recorded it with a live orchestra and all of the modern technology that we have for recording, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait to hear this new take. All the sound effects have also apparently been remastered, which I have to admit I'm very happy to hear as well. The remaster of Final Fantasy Tactics was kind of infamous for how tinny and compressed some of the sound effects were compared to the original release of the game. So knowing that they're at least working on preventing that for Tactic Ogre is reassuring. Hopefully, they're just as good as they were in the original Let Us Cling Together 2010 release, if not better. That's all that I ask. And finally, this is the big one. The entire script is voiced.
While we walk the earth, there will ever be conflict. A man will kill another over a husk of bread if not restrained.
This conflict is larger than us now.
I only want to see an end of death.
This is a massive change, even more so than the orchestra soundtrack, as this game is packed with dialogue. There are so many excellent characters, and emotionally charged scenes, and dramatic moments. It's going to be incredible to hear it all performed for the first time. It's also going to save my voice from devastation when I inevitably play the game on the channel, but that's a minor point. That's a personal point. It's not as important. It's been noted that both English and Japanese voiceover will be available via a toggle in the options at any time, which I'm sure is going to please most players. From what we've heard in the trailer, the English voice work sounds really good, and I'm sure it's going to be a game changer. But if you prefer the Japanese, I'm sure that's going to be excellent as well. And now we come to the piece de resistance, the cream of the crop, the most important aspect of almost any game, the gameplay. Much like the soundtrack and overall sound design, the mechanics of the game have apparently seen a vast overhaul. Right off the bat, the change I'm happiest to see is a shift to individual unit leveling away from the class-wide level system seen in the PSP release of Let Us Cling Together. What does that mean? Well, before, every time you got access to a new class, it would start at level 1. Any character that you changed to that class would, as a result, have their level dropped to 1, and would be forced to play catch-up for potentially hours of gameplay. Now, each unit in your army levels their class separately, and while we don't know exactly how leveling works yet between potentially character levels versus class levels, I'm sure we'll find it has been rebalanced to be far less tedious than it was in the past. Again, this is one of the most lamented features, I guess you could say, of the 2010 PSP release. I can only imagine that took the criticism of that feature to heart and will have done their absolute best to make the leveling experience far more fun, far more enjoyable, and far less time-consuming. Also, while Square Enix hasn't done a write-up on these changes, based on some screenshots and trailer footage, there are interesting changes to unit customization and stats that I'd like to discuss here. First, we can see that unit stats have undergone a complete rebalancing. Compare this screenshot of the Reborn project with this screenshot of the same battle from 2010's Let Us Cling Together. We can see Denham's HP, as well as the damage that he's dealing to the enemy soldier, are hugely inflated in Reborn. I imagine as part of the revamp of classes and levels. It remains to be seen what effect, if any, this will have on the flow of battle, but I would imagine that it should be fairly similar to the way the game played originally. They don't want to change that feel too much, I'm sure. But I wouldn't be surprised if some things had to get shuffled around to make that individual leveling system work. The other change we can see, thanks to the images posted by Square Enix, is a modification to the way items and skills are equipped to individual units. Previously, each character had a list of skill slots that you could equip skills to, including the ability to use various tiers of items, types of magic or weapons, and even flat boosts to different stats, just to name a few. This list started off with only a few slots, but could be upgraded to a max of 10 over the course of the game by spending experience on them. With every possible skill vying for these limited slots, there was a lot of room for customization, but there was also a lot of bloat. Over time, your list of possible skills would get quite clunky to manage, and it led to certain limitations, such as every character wanting to have a max level item skill, for example, as it gave you access to a huge list of insanely powerful endgame items on demand. Not exactly something that leads to in-depth and exciting customization. Now, however, it appears that items, spells, skills, and finishing moves have been split into their own separate equip slots. From what we can see, it appears that a character can equip 4 items, 4 spells, and 4 skills. This will absolutely force you to specialize members of your army for very particular roles, which to me sounds like it'll be quite a bit of fun, and by the end game, more fun and engaging, and give you more of an attachment to your units than the way the system used to be. It also implies that very broad skills like Strengthen or Damage Against Human Targets, which just give a flat boost to the damage of your attackers, won't really be present or as mandatory anymore. It would be so frustrating to have one of your 4 skill slots devoted to just being able to do maximum damage, you know, when you could have other more interesting skills applied there. So we'll have to see how it plays out. There are also slots for 8 finishing moves, which seems very excessive given you only needed 2 or 3 in the previous version of the game. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, you could only have up to 4 based on the weapon type that you were using. So I don't quite understand what that's about, but maybe it's been fleshed out as a system. I don't know. We definitely need more information on how these systems will work, but overall, I like what we've seen thus far. The AI has also been redesigned, with Square Enix stating that, quote, significant, unquote, changes to combat AI were made. They state that enemy tactics will change to suit the battlefield and the state of the battle itself, and should encourage players to really consider how to adapt their plans in response. This is another kind of wait-and-see scenario for me, as the AI was already really good in Let Us Cling Together, so I'm unsure what changes could have possibly been made, but I'm excited to find out. Finally, some quality of life improvements have been mentioned, including a, quote, quicker pace of battle, unquote, autosave, and a control scheme overhaul. The latter is not really surprising in the least, seeing as how the design of the PSP inspired some, shall we say, unique control schemes over the years that often don't quite mesh with modern design, so I'm not surprised they decided to revamp things to be a little bit more smooth of an experience. And as of right now, that's all we really know about the changes coming to Tactic Ogre Reborn. If you haven't already, I highly recommend that you watch the reveal trailer, although I imagine most of you probably already have. There's a lot of juicy details in there, and it's entirely possible that there are some things that I missed. There are also some things that weren't mentioned that I definitely want to see more information about, primarily any changes being made to the painfully clunky crafting system, which had potential in the 2010 release, but just, it was rough. It had unnecessary limitations on it, so I'd like to see that revisited and really fleshed out. And I'd also like to see any potential additions to side quests and the post-game dungeons, as there were already some very fun quests and interesting dungeons there, but I imagine given the time that we have here to really dive into the game, they could absolutely flesh some of that out as well. But this is still a wealth of information to digest, and I'm happy we've received it. As Tactic Ogre Reborn gets closer to launch, I'm sure we'll be getting even more of that information to go over, and I'll absolutely be doing so here. So, since I'll be covering the game once it launches, if you want to stay on top of the news or see some gameplay of it once it's out, make sure you subscribe. There's a lot of Tactic Ogre on the horizon, and I'm absolutely ready for it. Again, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.